Hey guys, Drifter here. Happy Halloween and welcome to what I think is going to be the true finale of the Epic Dream series. Almost 15 years ago, I started this series on YouTube to entertain you and also as a way for me to do a little bit of therapy for myself for all the horrors that I encountered in the dream realm. In case you're unfamiliar, this is a series where I tell stories from my dreams, things that happen to me in my dreams, because throughout my life I've had extremely vivid lucid dreams. Unfortunately, they're only lucid in the sense that I am aware that I am dreaming and I can control my own body and actions in the dream, but the setting and circumstances are most often controlled by a malicious third party, not unlike Freddy Krueger. Growing up as a little kid, I used to think I was unlucky. Maybe I watched too many scary movies. Maybe it was a result of trauma after being abused by my family. All of those seemed like pretty reasonable takes, but then during college, the dreams grew so extreme that I became afraid to sleep at all and began to worry that perhaps I was actually being haunted or possessed by a dream demon of all things. I was so scared that I decided to take advantage of my campus's free resources and sign up for therapy and a psychological assessment. After the assessment and a week or two of therapy, it was revealed to me that this malicious third party was most likely what's known as a Jungian shadow, named after the famous and also infamous psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, who was a contemporary of Freud. And the shadow most often represents an aspect of your personality which has been suppressed. I'm going to put wiki links down there below in the description so that you can read about it. My shadow was one that I could have conversations with, and over a number of years said that it preferred the name Mr. Shadow, though I don't think it truly had a name. I used the techniques from the therapy to do some mindfulness and meditation and help me minimize the impact of these terrible dreams, but they still persisted to some degree. And now this is very relevant to the finale of this story. I recently discovered that I was deficient in thiamine, which is vitamin B1, and trying to figure out why eventually led to the discovery that I was infected with two different tick-borne illnesses known as Babesia and Bartonella. They're extremely similar to Lyme disease, and they're both also known to cause their victims to have extremely disturbing dreams, like next-level nightmares and night terrors. Treating these infections elicited an extremely negative response from Mr. Shadow, which is where the story is going to be picking up today. But I wanted to let you know that I started this series almost 15 years ago, which is so long ago. If you go back and listen from the beginning, you can hear my accent and voice change throughout the videos. In the beginning, I was just coming hot off of a lot of abuse. I had this very dull, monotone voice with no emotion whatsoever and very southern because I was afraid to emote. So as you listen to the series, you'll actually hear me open up more and more. You'll find the playlist link down there below, and I'm going to try to turn this into a podcast as well. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, you're missing 15 years of history, and this episode may well be the finale of the entire series. And it's not going to end the way you think it is. Which brings us to today's dream story, or surprise, two dream stories. A small one and then the big one. After being sick for 3 years, last fall I was finally able to get a proper diagnosis with what's going wrong with me, and the very moment I got that diagnosis, my dreams began to greatly intensify and become much more violent and nasty. If you've listened to a lot of the stories in the past, there tends to be like a narrative, a thing going on, it's representative of a movie or something happening in my life, but my dreams began to almost immediately lose their allegorical meanings and shift directly into Saw movie level torture, just straight up gore porn. I just sort of loaded up into the worst scenario that you could possibly imagine. And Mr. Shadow, who has mostly been quiet for years now, suddenly shows up in person, so to speak, just to berate me and insult me. And every single night I was having these really, truly, like, god-awful dreams. For example, I'm going to give you a very short example one here. I dreamed that I was born into the My Hero Academia world. But I was a pleb with no superpowers, but almost everybody else had superpowers, so people without them were considered lesser than, inferior, maybe not even human. Kind of a lot like that episode where the heroes go and teach kindergartners who have advanced powers and just think that they're already little gods. And in this world, a group of superpower children cornered me in my own house and decided to torture me for fun, just fry me with lightning and lasers and fire, super strength, break my bones, pull my fingernails, chip my teeth out one by one, dehydrate an eyeball, just like pulling wings off of a fly. You know, there's no cruelty quite like that of a child. If you think about kind of maybe the ending of Wolverine, where the bad guy gets torn to shreds by a bunch of superpowered children, basically that. And I was already sick to begin with in the dream. I was already dreaming of myself as a disabled person, and they're just torturing me. It just seems like it just goes on forever with terrible, terrible pains and sensations. And then finally, everything freezes, like snap, like just completely pause, like you hit pause on a VHS tape or something. All of the characters freeze and then sort of dissipate and go away. And Mr. Shadow himself just walks in from around the corner, decided to show up and basically start berating me, telling me that I was a loser, that I was pathetic, that he hated me, that he wished he could come up with a better torture, that I deserved this. And then grabbing me by the hair, turning the stove on, dragging my already messed up body over to the stove, and burning my face over and over again on the burners. I could just smell my own flesh burning and singeing and screaming, and I'm trying pathetically to fight back, but there's no hope. Holds me up by one hand and says, "This is nothing." It just snaps the neck, slams the head, slams the body down. Somehow not paralyzed, I try to move, stomp the leg to break it, and just leans in right into my face to say, once again, you deserve this. I'm done with this bullshit of allegories. I'm done having them come up with a plot or a plan. I'm just going to give you exactly what I deserve. And weakly, pathetically, all I could do is ask, why? What did I do? What did I do to deserve this? And I got the scariest reply that I've ever gotten in all my years of dreaming, which is, I live behind your eyes. I see everything you see. I feel everything you feel. And I know everything you think. You get a break from the pain while you sleep, but I don't. I still have to feel it whether you're asleep or you're awake. So I'm going to make sure that while you're asleep, you feel it too. And that was downright frightening. He went on to continue to expand that one day when I had finally given up, that he would wake up in my body and have full control, and it would be a totally different ball game, and that all of the goals and dreams and desires that I had would be gone, and he'd be fulfilling his own, which was very, very scary. Now, I did this whole dream kind of like super fast because that's sort of the build up to the final one. But that was like every night for months, just every night for months. Broken bones, pulled fingers, popped eyeballs, burning skin, just torture. Not even this, you know, it made dreaming of like zombie hordes or like spooky ghosts seem actually fun in comparison, just truly miserable. About 6 months after that, after getting my diagnosis confirmed, I was finally able to begin my first round of treatment to kill the parasites that were in my body. Now, it's important to note for the story that, again, these parasites are known to cause extremely bad night terrors and vivid dreams, often on the violent extreme side of things. But beyond that, they're blood-borne parasites. They live inside your blood cells, and they can get through the blood-brain barrier and live inside your brain in a small capacity, too. So 3 days after starting my first round of treatment, I went to bed. And I woke up in a world very similar to our own and very similar to what I was experiencing. Even in my dream, I was still chronically ill, as I had been for years, except it was actually much worse than what I was experiencing at the moment. I was barely able to get around, like kind of mostly bedridden, hands very weak, and sleep very well, skinny, emaciated, pale, hair falling out, vision failing, everything that you can imagine, looking like a Holocaust victim. It was super bad. But this is America. You still have to work to afford your insurance, or you don't get medical treatment. If you don't work, you can just go die. So in this dream world, which is very reflective of our own, I had taken up the job as a social media strategy consultant for a variety of large and powerful groups that I find distasteful. Think huge corporations that act unethically, like pharmaceutical companies that sell opioids, or political super PACs that hyper-focus on divisive issues. Maybe a crime organization that needs to appear more legitimate than they actually are. I was making my money with dirty money. I was basically just helping the worst people on the planet do their things and achieve their goals in order to be able to keep affording my healthcare. I want to keep this video completely apolitical and focused on the deeper meaning of the dream, so I'm not going to name the names of specific organizations or people. Instead, I'm going to talk a little bit in generalities, because of what I want you as the listener to do is fill in whatever group comes to mind when I describe them, because the point of this video isn't to talk about who said what, when, where, and why, but rather that I had been working for the very people which I despise most. And in this dream world, I'd been doing some fantastic work for years and was considered one of the world's best social media disruptors, one of the best strategists. I could take an absolutely disastrous, illegal product launch that killed children and spin it back around into something profitable overnight. Top notch. Could never do that in real life, but can in the dream world apparently. But despite all of this and working hard to stay alive, my health was growing worse and worse every single day. I was just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And I went from mostly bedridden to fully bedridden. I was completely stuck in the bed. I had a little hospital bed in my house, my little bed PC, my little laptop I would do my work from. Arms and legs start to fail. Muscle mass is wasting. Breathing is difficult, just raspy. Difficult breathing all the time, can't quite keep my food down, and was fully not able to live independently. I have to depend on my wife or either a caretaker to keep me on track of things, and apparently it got so bad that the quality of my work began to slip. The campaigns weren't working, the strategy wasn't quite clicking with the youth the way it was supposed to. So one day, with no announcement whatsoever, a group of suits showed up at my house. Just think standard corporate, square-jawed, broad-shouldered dudes wearing suits, look like an army of spies or corporate goons, if you can imagine them, something like that. Show up at my house and involuntarily escort me to a private hospital owned by one of those extremely unethical corporations that I had been working for. It's the kind of hospital that truly only billionaires would go to and exist only for them and their families. And I didn't get a choice. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay home. I wanted to do my own thing. But no. You don't get to do that. You work for us. You have to come with us. And I was forced out of my house to this unusual private hospital. The hospital I was brought to was a little bit odd. It was a little bit empty, kind of quiet for a hospital. You don't hear those machines booping and beeping indicating people's life support status, but I figured, hey, this is a private hospital for the ultra rich. Maybe it's not super well staffed, or maybe there's not that many patients. After being left in the hospital for a very short period of time, the CEO of the company that owned it would later arrive and offer me free treatment for life, which would return my health to normal, but I had to agree to do PR work for that company indefinitely. Now, in this time, I am sick, nearing delirium, largely immobile, difficult to get around on my own, and I've sort of had a little bit of time to sit in the hospital room and think, and came to the conclusion that maybe I, in this dream world, have caused enough harm to the world. Maybe by sticking up for the worst people on the planet and doing their dirty work, I have in some way made the world worse, and maybe it's best if I just die, and I probably deserve to die slowly and painfully for my actions, but I'm not going to use my last remaining strength to continue to cause harm to other people, and this is me truly giving up and accepting death, as I was sort of dealing with in my personal life as well. And I told the CEO just as much. They were very frustrated, said that I made a stupid choice, left the room, and then sent in a different person, an operative for one of those very malicious political super PACs that I'd worked for, decided to come in, and she made some offerings of a whole bunch of money and benefits on top of the return to health. Once again, I declined. I didn't want a whole bunch of money. I didn't want my health. I didn't want to continue to hurt people through this social media thing that I was doing. After this conversation, I'm involuntarily transported to a more secure wing of the hospital. Treatments are forced upon me. I'm trying to opt out because I don't want to accept any dirty deals, but I get forced to take treatments and I start feeling better, get a little bit more strength. I can move around a little bit. And as soon as I'm starting to feel better, all treatments are withdrawn, symptoms return, and I go right back to my mostly bedridden state. It was a power play to show that they were in control of my life and I was not, that they could make me healthy or well as they saw fit. Next, a member of the really nasty criminal organization that I was talking about came to visit, sat down beside me on my bed. They held their hand out and stroked my hair and, held my hand a little bit, but not necessarily in a comforting way, more in a way that reminded me that I was being handled like a sick animal, like I could be touched and manipulated as they saw fit, and less so for comfort. So this was just straight up another power play. Again, with an offer. This time the offer was made that not only would I get my health back, not only would they give me an incredible amount of personal wealth, but that I could also join this cabal of powerful people. Think something like the Illuminati. Agreeing to work with them would give me the opportunity to not only live a healthy, happy, and rich life, but also reshape the world as I saw fit, kind of, within the confines of their organizational goals, of course. All I had to do was agree to come back on board and help them out. Once again, I declined this offer and told the head of the criminal organization that I had made my peace with this world and that I was ready to die and I was no longer willing to help. Looking somewhat dejected, actually, instead of mad, the head of the criminal organization told me that I would be receiving one final visitor and then left. Not yet realizing I was in a dream, I decided that I was pretty much done with this, and I did not want to die in a place controlled by the people that I hated most in the world. And knowing that there would only be a few minutes of gap time between when the criminal left and when the next person coming in to make an offer would arrive, I desperately unplugged all of the machinery, popping it out of my veins, getting rid of the IV drips, taking the mask off, unclipping from my little finger clamps, doing everything I can to unhook myself and get out of the hospital. Also had some time to kind of put on some semblance of normal clothes, but not quite. How it'd be in the hospital, mostly gowns and those hospital socks. And I began to struggle my way out of the private hospital. It was painful. It was awful. I could barely walk. Every step I took made my feet ache and creak. I had to use rails. Every joint in the body hurt. Even my hands holding the rails hurt, which is again something I was dealing with in real life. All of my nerves flared up. I'm dealing with sciatica, nerve pain, that heavy, raspy, kind of out of breath breathing, sick to my stomach. Head fully spinning with vertigo, holding on to the floor sometimes so you don't fall into the ceiling, occasionally tripping and crawling and struggling and hurting to even hit the buttons on the elevator. I was truly on death's door, but as I continued to push through and try to escape, I didn't think I was going to go far, but you gotta try. I noticed that the hospital was entirely empty, and it seemed like I was the only person there. There were no doctors, no nurses, no staff, not even the typical security you would see at the front door. And I felt more like I was walking through a movie set that was just supposed to look like a hospital than it was an actual medical facility. And after what felt like running a marathon, but was probably just like 2 flights of stairs, I finally made it to the front sliding door, which were blacked out for some reason, so I couldn't see beyond them. This struck me as unusual, but perhaps that's not unusual for a private hospital for billionaires. Maybe they need their privacy. But I am ready to get out of here and just die on the streets and not work for these people. I pushed on ahead right through the blacked out doors without any hesitation, and as soon as they closed behind me, I realized that I wasn't outside the hospital or still in the hospital, but was in something of a private room, a totally different room. It actually reminded me of a hotel room, specifically the hotel rooms in the Ritz-Carlton in downtown LA. So think very upscale, very rich, very nice bougie hotel room. I kind of look behind me and there's sliding doors. I look into the room and there's what appears to be a regular hotel room exit door on the other side. Kind of like I'd walked in from the sliding doors from the balcony area, except it connected to a hospital in this weird extra dimensional space. I noticed in the room, a person was waiting on me. Sitting on the bed facing me was a sort of generic-looking businessman holding a briefcase, had a little pen ready to sign, and had a contract already out. He very politely asked me to take a seat in front of the little chair that he had set up facing the bed. He was sitting on the bed with the briefcase and all of the equipment and stuff. And it was at this point I realized that I was in a dream, and I realized exactly who I was talking to. This was Mr. Shadow. This is the person, the entity, the being that had been tormenting me for years, that I actually had not seen in years, but was still sort of a presence in dreams from time to time. The thing that struck me as odd about this is that this is the most neutral form that I've ever seen Mr. Shadow take. He normally chooses a more menacing role of a monster, a demon or something, perhaps mirrors me in some sort of malevolent way, or assumes the form of people I love in order to be manipulative and kind of weird about things. But this time it was very normal, very neutral, very pleasant. And he began to explain that there was a more serious offer being made here than money or health, and that all he needed in return was for me to do something in the waking world. I had to do something in the real world which he could not interact with. I was genuinely too exhausted to continue to push through to the door on the other side of the hotel room, and I also knew from past experience that Mr. Shadow more or less controls this world, so I probably wasn't going to be able to leave even if I wanted to. Reluctantly, I hobbled over to the chair facing the bed and took a seat to hear out the offer. The contract and the offer that was explained to me was that Mr. Shadow wanted me to stop taking my anti-parasitic and antibacterial medications. That when I woke up, I was supposed to just go full turkey and agree to never treat the Babesia and Bartonella ever again. In exchange, I would be granted paradise in the dream world. The offer was that every dream I have could be lucid, I could control it however I wanted, it could always be pleasant. It could be anything, it could be better, it didn't have to be bad and awful. Mr. Shadow explained that he was in control of the majority of the dream world, and it didn't always have to be bad. Instead, every night when I went to bed, it could be that I just go to heaven, or paradise, or some sort of pleasure planet for all your carnal needs, or experience near godhood with the limits being only my imagination. The only caveat being that I would never be allowed to treat my disease and continue to be sick in the real world. And this is an interesting offer. It'd be like godhood for 12 hours a day while your body wastes away. What's it worth to you? The yin and the yang, like the shirt here, some suffering and some paradise. I do not trust this entity at all, so I declined this offer without any hesitation, just instant rejection, and that seems to have genuinely hurt the Shadow for the first time in a very long time. I swear I saw a person almost shatter like a pane of glass and then almost immediately reform into a different person, taking the guise of somebody that was much more trustworthy to me. Put a hand on my hand, leaned in empathetically, and said that now was a time for change and for healing, and that if I could let go of my old biases, then perhaps a new deal could be struck. I instinctively brushed aside their hand and told them that I fundamentally do not trust them, that I've lived my entire life suffering horrible nightmares almost every single night. Not nightmares that are short, but nightmares that feel like years. I've suffered through psychological manipulations that most people can barely fathom. And the suffering was so great that it eroded any hope of there ever being trust or an amicable agreement. That statement seemed to hurt Mr. Shadow even more because they screamed and morphed and wailed and changed their form and made horrible noises in an agony that I've never heard before from this creature. Kind of reminded me of like when you're in a movie and the demon talks and it's got all these voices kind of echoing whatever it's saying. The entire room shook like an earthquake. I'm holding onto the chair for dear life because I don't know what's coming next. I'm just expecting to get tortured. And the Shadow transformed into a humanoid being, composed almost entirely of viscous black liquid. It was like staring into Vanta Black, like the deepest, darkest shadow possible, almost cutting out a part of the room like it was 2D and it shouldn't even be there, before quickly reconstituting and forming into the Temptress from an Epic Dream video. I think it was an episode about 2 videos back. I had a dream where sort of a succubus was tempting me with all sorts of wild things and wanted my loyalty, tried to take the most pleasing, interesting form that I might have a chance for falling for, and then the backdrop of the Ritz-Carlton completely collapses. The wall just falls over flat like a card, as if it were a movie set that wasn't even there, and I could see past the back wall. Behind the former back wall and on one part of the room, it was like looking through a window at fantasy realms, sci-fi realms, versions of heaven, paradises of perversion, and foods and buffets that were truly only imaginary. It was cycling very quick like a slideshow, showing me everything that was possible, snapping back and forth so fast. It's almost like it was, instead of one thing, perhaps many things in one. This was the offer of paradise being truly put on the table in a very tangible way that I can see, like when the salesman wants you to test drive the car and really feel it and really touch it. The shadow, now in the form of a woman designed to seduce me, very sweetly took my left hand, put it up to her face, pressed it on the cheeks as if to ask for comfort and gentle touches, and while holding it there, looked me dead into my eyes with her sad eyes, her deeply, profoundly sad eyes, and asked one more time, please, please reconsider. I know that I've been bad to you, but that can change. I can change. We can change together. This was such a radical departure from any other experience that I've had with Mr. Shadow, and for the first time ever in my entire life, this thing seemed sad, sorrowful, almost as if it had remorse or regrets, which is not a thing that I even knew it was capable of. And beyond that, behind all the sadness, it seemed kind of scared and started crying oily black tears that streaked down its face like a horror movie villain or like a girl ugly crying into makeup. Eyes completely filling with these black tears, filling up on the body, draining of color, almost going full black and white like a painting that was starting to melt. It was full on ugly crying and just repeating the phrase, please, please, over and over again. And perhaps for the first time in my life, I actually felt some degree of empathy for Mr. Shadow, some reluctance to be nasty or to be harmful towards that entity. But I was not a fool. I might have had a twang of empathy, but I did not forget the nearly 40 years of nightly torture that I'd suffer through all the burnings, electrocutions, decapitations, skin peeling, acid, horrible stuff that I've suffered through. This sad show was not enough to motivate me, so I replied, I will never trust you. I will never accept your deal. There is no paradise that you can offer me to place even the slightest iota of trust in you. There is no deal. There will never be a deal, and I'm leaving. Upon saying that, I could hear the regular door to the exit of the hotel room click and unlock quite loudly. I pulled my hand back away from the face of the shadow, still sobbing, begging, pleading for me to reconsider, walked over to the door, and exited the building. I don't remember what was on the other side of the door, just completely blank. The only thing I remember is the sound of the door clicking shut when I pulled it behind me, not slamming it, but a little harder than usual. It was a door I really wanted to make shut, and as soon as it clicked shut, I woke back up, but feeling different, feeling kind of good, better, rested, normal perhaps. Something was very different inside of me. That was the very last time I had a nightmare. This happened about a year ago, back in the real world, the really real Drifter here, not, dreamland stuff. I completed 2 rounds of treatment for the tick-borne illnesses. This happened on the 3rd day of treating this, almost a year ago. The full course of treatments were brutal, miserable, and unpleasant. The second one almost messed up my heart. But again, that was almost exactly a year ago, and I have not had a true nightmare or heard a peep of Mr. Shadow since then. The intensity of my dreams has decreased by about 95%. I mostly have good dreams now, or at least relatively normal ones. There are some action hero kind of dreams mixed in there, and there are some that are reliving past traumas, or sometimes I watch spooky movies before going to bed and dream about them. That might be a little bit unpleasant, but absolutely nothing. Even the worst of my current dreams that I've been having for the last year don't even hit 10% of the intensity of a normal one from before. It was just, I feel like I've kind of gone back to normal, and I have this mix of dreams that's pretty okay. There's no malicious dream directors, no Freddy Krueger stand-ins, no Mr. Shadow, no, dreaming 30 years in the world and waking up not knowing what reality you're in, no more night terrors. For the first time in my life, I'm sleeping peacefully. And that's why I said I think that this could actually be a finale, a true resolution to the Epic Dream series. So that begs the question, what happened? And I've got 3 answers for you. I've got a sci-fi answer, I've got a psychology answer, and I've got a very practical biomechanical answer. When this happened, I was feeling better, but still a little bit distressed by this unusual experience that the supernatural feeling entity that I had experienced for my whole life was begging me not to take a certain medication. And knowing that the parasites are in my blood and that they also are in my brain in some capacity, it made me wonder if, since this has been with me for so long, I believe possibly even since birth or shortly thereafter, I was probably infected as a child, that perhaps it's been with me so long that the parasites have become sentient. Perhaps there's enough of them clustered somewhere to have some sort of degree of thought or awareness. Perhaps it's occupying some sort of brain space and I was being taken over, and this sort of charade that was put on to beg me to stop taking medication was this parasite's last attempt at survival for itself. That's a very sci-fi answer. I don't believe that little creepy crawlies and tick-borne illnesses like Lyme are sentient and that they can think. But man, I was going through it, so I was going through some thoughts. The more psychological answer is that this is probably just how my brain was processing the treatment and the physical changes that were going on, because my body was feeling better. I knew that I was supposed to not have nightmares after this, and there were a lot of factors, and I watch a lot of sci-fi and horror movie stuff. You guys see that on the channel. So maybe out of all of the media that I absorb and the way I tell stories and think about myself, this is just how my brain processed the treatment. And a similarly practical answer is that I did treat a disease known for causing horrible nightmares. The people that have these diseases, and when the symptom expression is nightmares, will tell you that they are very, very, very extreme. Just, I'd never heard anybody describe dreams quite like I was having until I read some of their stories. So it's not surprising that treating this disease pretty much eliminated all of that, and I'm back to normal dreaming now. And that's all the answers I've got. I don't believe this was magic. I don't believe the parasites were sentient. I believe this is me, how I process this sort of change in my body. And I hope to keep having sweet dreams. I hope that this is a finale to the Epic Dream series and that I never again have to update this series with something unpleasant. If I have an epic dream, if there's an update to this series, I'm really hoping that the next one is something fun, something more action movie or fantastical or fantasy land, and not this sort of horror train that I've been on for most of my life. And I genuinely hope that Mr. Shadow is gone, dead, removed, absorbed, integrated with the main consciousness, parasites burned away, whatever. Just, that's a problem I never want to have to deal with again in my life. Guys, that is all for this video. Might be all for this series. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.